At the dinner table, a girl handed a fruit knife to her uncle and signaled him to kill her parents in exchange for their freedom. As blood splattered across her face, she revealed a meaningful smile. The girl's name is Shiki. Her intelligence far surpasses that of ordinary people. At the age of 5, she was already contemplating the meaning of life. By 11, she had earned a doctoral degree. At 12, she became the world's leading genius in programming. From then on, she was hailed as the closest existence to a god among humans. Countless scholars regarded her as their idol. However, at the age of 14, she murdered her own parents, but since she was diagnosed as mentally ill, she was deemed not guilty. After that, she gradually disappeared from public view. In reality, she had been quietly conducting scientific research at a private research institute on a remote island. 15 years have passed since then. The male protagonist, Saikawa, is the youngest professor at his university. He too possesses a brilliant mind and greatly admires Shiki's academic achievements and her unique way of thinking. Shiki believes that in this world, only the mind is truly free. Children are born with boundless imagination, but as they grow older, they gradually become complicated and constrained, and Shiki seems to be in pursuit of a pure form of freedom. Saikawa has a student named Mo, who is also the daughter of his mentor. Mo, with her extraordinary skills in mathematical computation and privileged background, had always been proud and confident, until she met someone even more brilliant, Saikawa. Because of this, Mo developed feelings for Saikawa. Seeing how much Saikawa admired Shiki, she, too, became curious about this person. Coincidentally, 3 years ago, the long-silent Shiki began appearing in public again. She accepted interviews through the internet and on screen, and communicated with scholars. Mo used her powerful family connections to secure a chance to speak with Professor Shiki. Even though Shiki was nearly 30 years old, she looked like a teenager. During their conversation, Mo brought up the murder from 15 years ago. Shiki stated plainly that it was a doll who committed the crime. She was merely a spectator to it all, and that the doll had disappeared afterward. Then, Mo asked her final question, "What exactly are you?" This question caused a slight ripple in the normally composed Shiki. Professor Saikawa, upon hearing about Mo's meeting with Shiki, expressed his envy. Mo immediately suggested organizing an academic field trip, choosing Shiki's research institute on the remote island as the destination. She then used her family's influence to gain access to visit the institute. During their journey, the deputy director of the research institute, Yamane, came to greet Saikawa on the ship. Yamane briefly introduced the institute. Located on an isolated island, the research conducted there is highly classified. Internet and communication are strictly limited. Authorization is required for any direct contact with the outside world. At night, Saikawa and his group arrived on the island for camping. Mo took the opportunity to visit the research institute together with Saikawa. Coincidentally, Director Seiji was out, so Deputy Director Yamane received them instead. Yamane told them that Director Seiji was actually Shiki's biological uncle, and this time, he was away to pick up Shiki's younger sister. It was said that Shiki had a sister in the US, named Miki. Yamane also knew that Mo and Saikawa came with the intention of meeting Shiki. In fact, Yamane had informed Shiki about their visit several days earlier, but he never received a response from her, and the system showed that her room had been locked. It was possible that there was a glitch in the software. Mo believed Shiki might be having health issues. To be safe, she suggested that the staff break in and check on her. They all headed to Shiki's room. At that moment, the research institute's system suddenly malfunctioned, and Shiki's door mysteriously opened on its own. Then, a robot carried out a figure dressed in a wedding gown. Mo got a clear look at the face of the figure. She immediately recognized it as Shiki. Yamane used his access privileges to activate the institute's emergency alert system. When the lights came on, everyone stepped closer to the figure. They found that it was indeed Shiki herself. Her limbs had been severed, and her body showed signs of livor mortis. She had clearly been dead for several days. This was now officially a murder case, and the killer was likely still inside Shiki's room. But according to the institute's staff, Shiki's room had not been opened for the past 15 years. No one besides Shiki could have entered or exited the room. All of this was backed up by the institute's surveillance footage. This meant that committing murder and escaping undetected from the institute should have been impossible. The staff then prepared to contact the police, but they discovered that all network and communication lines were down, and there was no cell signal on this remote island. Just then, Director Seiji returned with Shiki's sister. Everyone gathered on the rooftop to meet Shiki's younger sister, Miki. Although she was the younger sister, Miki appeared to be older than Shiki. The group explained the situation to Seiji and asked him to use the radio equipment on the helicopter to contact the police. However, after returning to the research institute, they noticed that Seiji hadn't come back down from the roof. They went up to check again, only to find that Seiji had been murdered. The radio communication equipment had also been destroyed. The staff immediately checked the institute's access logs. There were no signs of any unauthorized entries, which meant the killer was hiding somewhere within the research institute and had evaded all surveillance without leaving a trace. With no other option, the institute's personnel began repairing the network to try to contact the police. During this time, Saikawa and Mo started investigating this series of bizarre incidents. First, they reviewed the surveillance footage of Shiki's door before and after the incident. There was indeed no footage of anyone exiting her room. Next, they looked into the cause of the system failure at the institute. The Research Institute's system was a fourth-generation RM system developed exclusively by Shiki. After a thorough examination, Saikawa concluded that the system was flawless. External hacking or virus interference was completely impossible. Saikawa believed it was highly likely that someone had installed a timed program into the RM system in advance, so that the system would crash at the exact moment of the incident. The group investigated for a long time but couldn't find any useful clues, so they decided to enter Shiki's room to search for evidence. The room was immaculately clean, completely unlike the scene of a murder, and although it was a room meant for one person, there were 2 chairs placed inside. Then they moved to Shiki's bedroom, but the door was locked from the inside. Suddenly, they heard Shiki's voice from within. Everyone was startled. Then, a robot named Doru opened the bedroom door. It seemed that the drill and the metal fragments they found earlier on the table had been used to build this robot. Moreover, the robot appeared to be specifically designed to lock and unlock the door from inside. Inside the bedroom, they saw dolls, building blocks, and other toys. They carefully searched the entire room, but found no murder weapon or any of Shiki's severed limbs. Then Saikawa and the others went to the kitchen. There, they discovered a garbage chute. Saikawa proposed the first theory. After murdering Shiki, the killer dismembered her body in the bathroom, then disposed of the body parts through the garbage chute in the kitchen. Afterward, the killer meticulously cleaned the room, erasing all traces. This suggested that the murderer must have stayed in the room for a long time. However, how could the killer have also made it to the rooftop in time to kill Seiji? Then Saikawa examined Shiki's computer. They discovered that Shiki's computer was already running the 6th version of the RM system, yet the Research Institute was still using the older version. Why hadn't Shiki deployed the newest version throughout the institute? Saikawa then opened the calendar on her computer. In a diary entry from the day before, there was a note. It read, "Everything becomes F." There were also several other notes signed with different names. Besides Shiki's own name, there were 3 unfamiliar names: Kishio, Shikima, and Doru. Later, Saikawa and Mo visited the room of Seiji's wife, Yumiko. She was also Shiki's aunt by marriage. Yumiko told them that Shiki actually suffered from dissociative identity disorder. The names they had seen were all part of her alternate personalities, but these personalities had actually existed in real life. Kishio was Shiki's twin brother, who died shortly after birth. Shikima had been a maid who cared for Shiki while she lived in the US, but she too died in an accident. Dora was the name of Shiki's favorite doll. It seemed that Shiki took those important to her, people who had passed away, and preserved them in her mind as alternate personalities, allowing them to continue existing in her inner world. At that moment, Mo suddenly remembered that when Shiki murdered her parents, she had claimed that it was a doll who committed the crime. Yumiko revealed that the murder from 15 years ago happened in this very room. At the time, Yumiko heard a scream and rushed in. She found Shiki's mother already dead, and Shiki's father severely wounded. Her husband, Seiji, was standing right behind Shiki, tightly holding her hand, seemingly trying to stop her. Before dying, Shiki's father shouted, "I will never forgive you." But no one knew what kind of conflict had taken place between them. Next, Saikawa spoke with Shiki's younger sister, Miki. Miki said that her bag, which she had left in the helicopter, had gone missing. It contained her ID and a doll gift for Shiki. Miki recalled something her sister once told her: the human body is just a vessel, the spirit is eternal. Saikawa believed that Shiki had a different moral framework. Her thoughts weren't bound by traditional or societal norms, and her multiple personalities were a manifestation of her pursuit of freedom. After that, Saikawa and Mo went to the surveillance room. This time, Mo noticed something suspicious in the footage. Someone had used the elevator and traveled from the second basement level to the rooftop. Back in their room, the two discussed the suspicious findings. At that moment, the power at the research institute went out again, but this time, it was because Yamane had restarted the system during repairs. In the sudden blackout, Mo nervously grabbed Saikawa's hand. Saikawa glanced at Mo and remembered her conversation with Shiki. Back then, Shiki had been wearing gloves. Mo recalled that although Shiki was the older sister, she appeared physically smaller than Miki. At the time, Shiki had said something that Mo couldn't understand. Only the number 7 is lonely in math, I am 7. Hearing this, Saikawa quickly took a drag from his cigarette to steady his emotions. Then he shared a bold theory with Mo. The person you met back then might not have been Shiki. At that moment, the Research Institute's systems finally came back online. Mo immediately contacted the police. Saikawa and Mo began analyzing the clues they had gathered. Then Saikawa revealed a shocking deduction. 15 years ago, it was true that only one person entered the room, but inside that room, there were actually two people. Shiki and another individual had been living together in that sealed room for nearly 15 years. The dolls in the bedroom and the lock-operating robot had been prepared for that other person. That person was Shiki's daughter, and the words Shiki's father cried out before dying, "I will never forgive you," were not directed at Shiki, but at Seiji, for making his young daughter pregnant. Shiki's daughter, now grown up, murdered her mother, dismembered her, and used her mother's fingerprints to exit the room. She then took the elevator to the rooftop and killed Seiji, her own father. But there was still one problem with this theory. The surveillance footage showed no one leaving the room. Then Saikawa looked down at his wristwatch, which he hadn't reset for 2 days, and in that moment, he realized how the killer pulled it off. The two of them rushed to the surveillance room and pulled up today's video logs to compare them minute by minute. They discovered that 1 minute of footage was missing. At that moment, all of Saikawa's doubts were resolved. He told Mo the reason that 1 minute was missing was because the killer had previously adjusted the Research Institute's system time to be 1 minute slow. Just now, when Yamane restarted the system, it synced with the network again, and the time instantly jumped forward by 1 minute. Because of how computer systems store data, the Research Institute's surveillance saves a video file every minute. For example, from 12 to 12:01, one file is generated, but if at 12:01, the system clock is turned back to 12 o'clock, then two video files would have the same file name, and due to the duplicate name, the system would overwrite the earlier file with the new one. Just like that, 1 minute of footage vanished, and it was during this missing minute that the killer exited the room and went to the rooftop to murder Seiji. Saikawa then began studying the source code of the RM system. He found a timer program in the system that counted time by the hour. The code controlled the mechanism to open Shiki's room door, and the RM system that Shiki designed could only count up to a maximum of 535 hours, which is FFFF in hexadecimal. Coincidentally, the time between the system's initial installation and the murder matched exactly 535 hours. With that, all the clues finally connected. Saikawa now knew who the real killer was. He used a terminal device to contact the person hiding in the shadows, and that person was none other than Shiki, who was supposed to be dead. They communicated through a virtual illusion device. Saikawa began explaining his deductions to Shiki. 15 years ago, Shiki had a forbidden relationship with her uncle, Seiji, and became pregnant. Shiki believed that death was a way to transcend the physical body. When new life is born, the mother must die. That was her view of the cycle of life. Saikawa thought Shiki was someone who desperately craved freedom. She couldn't tolerate her parents interfering with her emotions, so after they tried to stop her, she murdered them both. She later gave birth to her daughter in the Research Institute and named her Doru. Shiki raised Doru with her ideology of absolute freedom and told her that on her 15th birthday, she must kill her mother to complete the cycle of life and death. However, Mo's recent question planted doubt in Doru's mind, having been mentally controlled all her life. Doru started to question who she truly was, and what her purpose for living was. But in the end, Doru was just a normal human being. She couldn't understand her mother's warped ideology. Her mind collapsed, and she chose to take her own life. Shiki then disguised her daughter's corpse as her own, severed the limbs to erase fingerprint evidence, and used the preset system program to leave the room and kill Seiji on the rooftop. The fact that Seiji didn't resist proved that he had willingly accepted his fate. As for Miki, the supposed younger sister, she never existed. She was simply Shiki in disguise, with Seiji playing along in one final performance, meant to deceive everyone else. After that, Saikawa went to Miki's room and found it empty. On the wall, one sentence was left behind: "See you next time, Professor Saikawa." The case was over. Saikawa and Mo returned to their everyday lives, and somewhere, in a quiet corner of the world, Shiki sat alone by the sea, softly whispering the names of those she loved and lost. This is a suspense anime adapted from a novel. Maybe I didn't explain it perfectly, but this anime is truly a mental labyrinth. I highly recommend watching the original work.